The Disappearance of the Semite, how a linguistic identity was politicized, racialized, and lost.
A thousand voices lost in the sand, words carved in stone by a ghostly hand, echoes whisper through the desert's
Part 5 further details how the term Semite was racialized in Western thought, creating a pseudoscientific basis for both anti-Jewish and anti-Arab sentiment. It also illustrates the shift from linguistic to racial categories and how this impacted public understanding and policy. The narrowing of anti-Semitism to refer solely to Jews is critiqued in light of the broader Semitic identity. Part 5. Discussions on the term Semite, its linguistic origins, and the racialization of Jews and Arabs. The term Semite began as a linguistic classification, but over time, it was co-opted by political ideologies and racial theories that distorted its meaning beyond recognition. This part unpacks the evolution of the term, its philological origins, its appropriation in racial science, and the modern consequences for how Jews and Arabs are perceived, categorized, and divided. As discussed in Part 2, the term Semitic was originally coined by European linguists in the late 18th century to describe a family of related languages including Hebrew, Arabic, Aramaic, Amharic, and others. These languages share grammatical structures, vocabulary roots, and a particular geographic position stretching from the Levant to the Horn of Africa. Crucially, Semitic referred to language, not race or ethnicity. However, as Europe's obsession with classification intensified in the 19th century, language families were conflated with racial categories. The term Semitic began to take on racial overtones, often in opposition to the so-called Aryan or Indo-European race. This was not merely academic. It laid the groundwork for modern racial hierarchies, where language, skull shape, and skin tone were used to create and reinforce ideologies of superiority and inferiority. In this distorted racial lexicon, Jews became the Semites, marked, marginalized, and later persecuted for their alleged racial essence. At the same time, Arabs, who also spoke Semitic languages, were sometimes included in the category, but more often were assigned a contradictory position. Not quite white, not quite black, and rarely Semitic in the dominant Eurocentric imagination. The contradictions deepened in the 20th century. The rise of Nazi ideology cemented the term anti-Semitism as synonymous with anti-Jewish hatred. Yet this formulation was misleading in both language and scope. A true anti-Semite, if the term were used correctly, would be someone opposed to all Semitic peoples, Arabs, Jews, Assyrians, and others. But the term came to exclude Arabs entirely, despite their deep linguistic and cultural ties to the Semitic root. In fact, Arab resistance to Zionism or Western hegemony was sometimes itself labeled anti-Semitic, creating the absurdity of Semites being accused of bigotry against Semites. The political manipulation of the term Semite has had real-world implications. In popular discourse, especially in the West, Semite is often assumed to be a synonym for Jewish. This not only erases the broader Semitic family, but it also reinforces a binary in which Jewishness is elevated as the exclusive marker of Semitic identity, while Arabness is either vilified or rendered invisible. This racialization also split Jews themselves into uneven categories. Ashkenazi Jews, predominantly from Europe, were often seen as culturally and even racially distinct from Mizrahi and Sephardi Jews, whose Semitic identities overlapped more directly with Arab culture. In Israel, this led to internal racial hierarchies, with European Jews dominating political and economic structures, while Jews of Arab or North African descent faced systemic discrimination. In academic and political circles, few terms have been as abused, confused, and weaponized as Semite. What began as a linguistic descriptor became a racialized label, then a political cudgel. and finally a symbol of contested identity. Today, reclaiming the original scope of the term and its inclusive implications offers a path not just to intellectual clarity, but to the possibility of solidarity among peoples too often set in opposition.
Thousand voices lost in the sand, words carved in stone by a ghostly hand. Echoes whisper through the desert's face. Time hides the key to the sacred place. A scholar's quest to decode the past, sifting through shadows that forever last. In fate's beneath